$39 trillion. You see it in the news that the United States is over $39 trillion in debt. But what does it really mean? Who on earth does the United States owe that much money to? Politicians argue about it almost every election, and social media is full of people claiming America is either on the verge of bankruptcy or that the debt doesn't matter at all. But here's the funny part. Most Americans, even people who follow politics closely, don't actually understand what national debt is. Many people imagine there's a giant vault somewhere filled with IOUs. Others believe the United States simply owes China all of this money. And some think the government can just print more dollars and make the debt disappear overnight. None of those ideas tell the whole story. The truth is far more interesting, and once you understand it, you'll begin to see government spending, taxes, inflation, elections, and even your mortgage in a completely different way. By the end of this video, you'll understand what the national debt really is, who America actually owes, why the government keeps borrowing more every year, and whether this enormous debt is a ticking time bomb or simply the way modern economies work. But before we proceed, if you're new to the channel, this is Capital Lens. We simplify personal finance, money and financial systems, and company strategies. So if you are an aspiring entrepreneur or someone who loves business, click the subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any of our videos. Now back to the video. Let's start with a simple question. Imagine your household earns $80,000 a year, but every year you spend $90,000. This doesn't mean you are living recklessly. Maybe your mortgage payment increased. Maybe groceries have become more expensive, or maybe you had medical bills. Regardless of the reason, the truth is you're spending $10,000 more than you're bringing in. So what do? You borrow. Maybe you use a credit card, maybe you take out a personal loan, or maybe you refinance your mortgage. That borrowed money allows you to keep paying your bills today. But now you owe someone money in the future. Governments work much the same way. Every year, the U.S. government collects money primarily through taxes. Income taxes, payroll taxes, and other various fees all flow into the federal government's bank account. Then it spends that money. It pays military salaries. It funds Medicare and Medicaid. It builds highways and airports, invests in education, pays interest on money it has already borrowed in the past, and so much others. Some years, tax revenue is enough to cover those expenses. But most years, especially over the past several decades, government spending has been greater than government income. That difference is called the budget deficit. Let's say the government collects $5 trillion in taxes this year, but spends $6 trillion. That trillion-dollar gap has to come from somewhere, so the government borrows, and every dollar borrowed adds to the national debt. The budget deficit is debt in a single year. The national debt is debt accumulated over many years. The United States has experienced deficits since the early 1970s. But who is lending all this money to the government? Most people immediately answer, China. China certainly does. Japan too, and many other countries. But together, foreign governments own only a portion of America's total debt. The majority is actually owed to Americans. This surprises almost everyone. So here's how it works. When the U.S. government needs to borrow money, it doesn't usually walk into a bank and ask for a loan. Instead, it sells something called Treasury securities. These come in different forms. Treasury bills, Treasury notes, Treasury bonds. Regardless of the name, they all work on the same basic principle. You lend money to the U.S. government, and the government promises to pay you back later with interest. Suppose you buy a Treasury bond worth $10,000. You're basically saying, here's $10,000 today. Pay me back in 10 years, and while you're at it, pay me interest for letting you use my money. Millions of people and organizations make these investments every day. Banks, insurance companies, pension and mutual funds, retirement accounts, state governments, and even ordinary Americans can buy Treasury securities from the federal government. Why would anyone do that though? It's because U.S. Treasury securities are considered one of the safest investments in the world. The likelihood that the United States will completely fail to repay its debt has historically been extremely low. That reputation makes Treasury securities very attractive to investors looking for stability. So in many cases, when people say America owes trillions of dollars, they're actually talking about money owed to American workers' retirement funds. They're talking about pensions of teachers, firefighters, police, college endowments, savings accounts, and investment portfolios. Even if you've never purchased a Treasury bond yourself, you probably own some through your retirement investments. Now, this doesn't mean foreign countries aren't involved. They absolutely are. Countries around the world hold U.S. Treasury securities because the U.S. dollar plays a unique role in the global economy. It's the world's reserve currency. International trades and all is commonly priced in dollars. Many countries' central banks keep large reserves of U.S. dollars and Treasury securities because they're considered stable and highly liquid. U.S. Treasury bonds are almost like the world's savings account. If another country's central bank wants a safe place to park billions of dollars, they usually turn to the U.S. government debt. That's why countries like Japan, China, the UK, and many others own significant amounts of U.S. debt. So China didn't lend America money out of kindness. China bought Treasury securities because they were viewed as good investments and because doing so fit China's economic strategy. It's a business transaction, not a favor. Instead of imagining America desperately borrowing from one giant lender, picture millions of investors around the world voluntarily choosing to buy one of the safest financial assets available, the U.S. debt. Now we have a big question. If investors are eager to lend money to the U.S. government, why doesn't America just keep borrowing forever? The problem isn't borrowing. It's whether that borrowing is sustainable. Think about a business that borrows $1 billion to build a manufacturing plant. That's an enormous debt. But if the factory creates thousands of jobs, produces goods for decades, and generates billions in revenue, borrowing that money may have been an excellent decision. It's the same with the government. They borrow to build highways, airports, ports, and other infrastructure that helps the economy become more productive over time. If those investments help the economy grow faster than the cost of borrowing, debt can actually leave a country wealthier than before. That's why economists don't only ask how much debt a country has but also how large its economy is. To answer that, they compare national debt with gross domestic product, or GDP, the total value of everything the country produces in a year. A $39 trillion debt sounds alarming, but it means something very different if the economy's GDP is over $30 trillion every year. So far the economy keeps growing and the government can make its interest payments. Large amounts of debt can be manageable. This brings us to a common question. If America issues the dollar, why doesn't it simply print enough money to pay off its debt? At first, that sounds like an easy solution because new money can be created. However, creating enormous amounts of money doesn't create more houses, factories, food, or energy. What it creates is inflation, because everyone now has far more money and are competing for the same limited supply, so prices jump insanely. This happened in countries like Zimbabwe and Venezuela, where excessive money creation caused economy-wrecking inflation. The United States is not Zimbabwe, but the economic principle is the same. Printing away the national debt would simply replace it with severe inflation. Instead of printing endlessly, the government has managed debt by balancing borrowing, taxation, spending, and monetary policy. So if America can't borrow forever and it can't simply print away the debt, does that mean the national debt is a ticking time bomb? Not necessarily. You see, one of the biggest reasons America has been able to carry such a large national debt is trust. Every financial system depends on trust and confidence. When investors buy U.S. Treasury securities, they're betting that the U.S. will continue honoring its promises. And for over 2 centuries, that bet has largely paid off. America has built one of the strongest credit reputations in history through decades of economic growth, a large and productive economy, and a long record of repaying its debts. Because investors trust the United States, they're willing to lend money at low interest rates. That makes borrowing cheaper and gives the government tremendous financial flexibility. But trust isn't guaranteed forever. If investors ever began doubting America's ability to manage its finances, they'd demand higher interest rates to compensate for the additional risk. Higher interest rates creates larger deficits, requiring more borrowing. This can cause panic, forcing the government to cut spending, raise taxes, seek international bailouts, or partly default on its debt. So why hasn't that happened to the U.S.? First, America has the largest economy in the world. Second, the U.S. dollar being the world's reserve currency creates demand for dollar-denominated assets like Treasury securities. Third, U.S. financial markets are highly liquid, making Treasury securities attractive to large investors. Fourth, the U.S. has an exceptional record of meeting its financial obligations. None of these mean there are no risks, but it's why investors have strong confidence in the U.S. debt. In conclusion, what does all of this mean for you? Quite a lot. The national debt and its interest rates, if high, can force lawmakers into decisions like raising taxes or reducing spending, which will directly affect the prices you pay for groceries. your taxes, retirement savings, and the financial future of your children and grandchildren. So can America ever completely eliminate the national debt? Technically, yes. Realistically, it's unlikely, because eliminating all the debt wouldn't be desirable because of its importance to the investment markets. So the goal isn't to eliminate the national debt, it's to manage it by growing the economy's GDP and maintaining investors' confidence. The national debt isn't just a giant number. It's the result of government decisions, economic growth, and investor trust. America keeps borrowing because deficits require it. Investors are willing to lend, and the debt is strengthening its economy. Whether the debt becomes a ticking time bomb depends on whether the economy grows faster than the interest costs and if investors continue trusting the United States. That's why the national debt is neither something to ignore nor an inevitable disaster. It's something that must be managed carefully because it affects the current and long-term health of the American economy. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more simplified economic videos like this, and comment a financial mystery you want explained, and I'll see you in the next one.